All right, give them a big round of applause. Thank you, Laura Wolf and Raheem. Amazing. All right, are we still hanging in? Everybody got some coffee? Last couple of hours, ready for the parties tonight? All right, so we talked a little bit earlier about what brought you here to Web3. Was it the arts? Was it the culture? I don't think there's anything more synonymous with culture in Web3 than CryptoPunks. So our guests today, we have Natalie, who goes by Stone, and we have Sean Bonner, and they're going to be talking about low-res, high art. So please give them a warm welcome. Come on, a warm welcome. Let's go. This mic's right here.
Thank you. Here's my clicker. Hey, everybody. Is everyone having fun at NFT Paris?
Hello.
Yeah, woo! Come on, let's hype it up. No. All right, well, I was gonna do this talk alone, and I had this whole idea about talking about the paradox of punks, but then I decided I needed to invite my good friend, Sean Bonner, to join me, because otherwise, I don't know if I could have done it alone.
You would have done fine, I'm sure.
So we're actually gonna introduce each other. So maybe Sean's gonna kick it off. He's gonna tell you about me.
So I was going to follow on from yours. The whole thing that was set up.
Oh, wait. No, I'll go first. I'm already blowing it. All right, so Sean is an activist, an artist, an education genius, and he really has spent a lot of time researching and done a lot for the CryptoPunks community. And he has a really, really, really diverse history, ranging from working with Obey to researching with MIT to founding GMJP. So Sean's just an amazing human and a friend.
I was going to say, well, thank you very much. That's wonderful. I was going to say that your background's not entirely dissimilar. You know, you have a long history in, I guess, the best way to sort of summarize this is like artist advocacy, right? And like helping put artists in the forefront, helping them do their thing better for everyone, producing events around it that people can enjoy and understand what's happening more. And then most recently, spending time at Google, which, you know, sets things up wonderfully, and now you've stepped way down into our little world of CryptoPunks and Web3. We love what you do to it and for it. But I think the best place to go from here is the fact that you have the job that I would not wish on anybody. As general manager of CryptoPunks, which is this incredibly complex everything, right? A community that wants stuff but also doesn't want anything. And a project which is finished but also continuing in every way. So there's these huge challenges back and forth. And I don't know how you navigate that. So I think that that's probably a good way to start this off is like, how do you balance these completely conflicting, pulling sides of every piece of your job?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a tightrope at all times. But we actually, for this talk, I had this idea of calling it the paradox of punk, because not only is it a paradox for my job position as it is now, but like paradox is actually part of the DNA of CryptoPunks since the very beginning. And so Sean and I sat down together and we actually made a little list of all of the tensions. I think the first one is that it was originally free. But now it's the epitome of a luxury asset and a status symbol in this space.
I think that, I'll just jump in for a second. I think that that's an important piece too, because if you think about who is in the CryptoPunk community at this point, there's no accidental people in this community. There's nobody who just kind of stumbled into it and doesn't know. Everybody is in it for a very passionate and committed reason, right? Those are different reasons. There are some people who got this thing for free years ago and they love this and it's just a part of who they are. There's other people who paid a lot of money to be a part of it, right? But anybody who was just kind of wishy-washy or didn't really care one way or the other has moved on to something else, right? So what you're left with is these incredibly diehard people who are very opinionated
Yeah, well,
And not all in agreement.
No, they're definitely not. I mean, and I think there is a little bit of that existing tension within the community. You know, people that were here original, OG, and then post 2021. But I like to say that when I'm thinking about CryptoPunks and the community, that I like to think about the like-hearted and the different-minded, because I think that really speaks to what CryptoPunks are as a community, and I think that's actually some of what makes them so special in the first place. So that's one. Another one of my favorites, they were free to claim, so like in some way they're like anti-monetization, but then core to their DNA is also the marketplace. It's part of the art, it's part of what it was designed to be, that experimentation. So that's always very interesting. And then the marketplace itself is always perplexing me because it's not to be touched in a lot of ways, right? But we have to make sure that it's functional, and as new protocols and things are released, like in some ways it needs to evolve with that. So how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, there's this core DNA piece of independence built into it, right? Like you do not need someone else to approve, help with everything, but at the same time, things break. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that, you know, as technology evolves, that continues to function as it's supposed to.
Right. So I've been trying to figure out exactly what to do with the marketplace. I'm still working on it, but I like to think about the idea of co-building with the community. And I think that's a really interesting tension in itself. You know, Yuga and the community, I'll use that word instead of versus, how do we build together? How can there be a project where the IP is, you know, owned, yet also it's not owned and the community owns their IP? And I think those tensions are really actually not necessarily in conflict, but actually an opportunity. I think it's the same thing with derivatives as well. You know, and I mean, I know that Sean's a huge derivative fan. I'll give him a little shout out. He just dropped 2-bit this morning. Check it out. Woo woo.
I love derivatives because I think it's a sign of a powerful something, right? Like it's something that has caught on enough that people say, I want to add something to that. I want to build something on that, right? If whatever it is, the idea, the art, the song, the anything doesn't grab people, nobody is going to try to do something similar to it, right? And so that was one of the first things that really got me excited about CryptoPunks, was seeing how many people felt a connection to this and wanted to do something related to it, right? It's a very, very, very wide circle of people who have done something, you know, that they somehow want to connect to CryptoPunks.
Yeah, I actually think it's a really good barometer of health of the project. You know, you can look at the floor price, but to me, if derivatives are popping off, that means the project is healthy. And I know that Matt and John feel some kind of way about derivatives too, but they also are like, oh, wait, hold on. It's again, that tension that exists in this ecosystem generally of freedom and control, and we're all in this living art project together trying to figure out what the rules are, and are there rules, and can we break them? And of course, go ahead.
I think that like we both have a music background, and I think that it's a similar thing with a cover song. There are some artists who love it when someone covers their song, and there are other artists who feel insulted, right? Because they're like, but I did my song the right way, and you've changed it, and now that's not what it was supposed to be. And so I think that as an artist, Matt and John, as artists, right, of course they're going to have their personal thing, but we're outside of that a little bit, right? And we can look at it more objectively.
Well, I mean, honestly, every PFP collection, even though that wasn't what CryptoPunks originally were intended to be, are a derivative in some way, because they are, you know, the CryptoPunks are the Rosetta Stone of this entire space. They're the proto-NFT. Okay, and then the most obvious one, the tensions, is seeing this as a piece of high art or speculative investment. There's definitely a tension there. But some of my favorite is it's high art. It's in the Centre Pompidou here in Paris. But we also do this. We also do this. And we also do this. my recent love. So, how can these coexist where it's literally the Punk 110 is hanging in the museum. I'm having conversations with museums. This is a very important part of where we're trying to take the project. And simultaneously, there is this decentralized, playful, kind of disruptive community that is like reinterpreting the art and having fun with it.
I think this is not entirely dissimilar from the gift shop at a museum selling, coffee mugs and stickers and things of the things that are in the museum, right? It doesn't degrade them. It doesn't make them less in any way, even though this is essentially a cheap, kind of throwaway thing, right? It's that somebody has this piece somehow, right? And it helps spread these more along. Someone's gonna see these aren't technically sockets.
They're not technically sockets.
These are socket derivative.
You thought you were coming from a CryptoPunks. This
Right.
is actually a socks presentation.
Right? So you see this on its own, you don't necessarily know what it is, but most people are going to see this and they're going to instantly connect it to the next piece, and it's a reference back to all of this stuff, right? So it just continues to help spread these ideas even further, and this makes somebody laugh, they build the next thing on top of it, and it just continues to go.
And I think for me, when I'm thinking about how do I navigate all of these complexities and beauty and imperfection parts of what CryptoPunks are, it's really about grounding into this idea of legacy. And I think the idea of legacy can mean many things. There's not only about cementing the legacy, it's about archival work, it's about getting punks in museums, it's about the book, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But at the same time, it's also about expanding the legacy. And I think in a lot of ways, to me, CryptoPunks are the only collection that can represent this moment in time, this world, the values of this world. It can be something that is greater than itself. And that's my North Star for where I hope CryptoPunks go, and we can accomplish this together, is that when you hear the word CryptoPunk or hear about CryptoPunks, you think immediately art, technology, digital ownership, disruption, innovation, and it's inseparable from what the brand is. And I don't want it to just be these people in this room, people coming to NFT Paris. I want it to be a little kid on the street sees a CryptoPunk that Space Invader popped up on a wall, and they're like, oh yeah, I get what that means, and I want to be a part of that.
I mentioned this before. There's this quote by Dennis Hopper, and I'm paraphrasing it, but he essentially says that being an art collector, if you do it right, is just caretaking for these things so that they're in good shape for the next generation, right? You're just taking care of something for a little while and then passing it on and making sure not to ruin it in the way. And so I think that that's certainly one thing when you have a piece of art that can degrade. But it's a whole entire thing when you're talking about a piece of art that can't degrade, right? No, certainly CryptoPunks are going to outlive all of us in every way. So what does that legacy piece look like as the sort of general manager of this? Of course, you're talking about the archival, you protect the history and all of that, but you also have to look for the future. And the future can't be just always talking about the past. So I think that some of what you do and maybe the legacy project a little bit, the artist in residency, these are things that are sort of looking towards the future, and maybe that's something you could speak a little bit more on.
Yeah, so we just launched this project. It's called Punk in Residence, and we're really excited about it. And I think this is about engaging with the traditional art world in new ways, and also expanding what expression and innovation looks like for digital media. And so we just launched Punks in Residence. We actually did it with Nina Chanel Abney. You may or may not be familiar with her work, but she's currently hanging in the MoMA. She's an amazing artist that is able to bridge worlds herself. She plays in the digital art space. She does collaborations with Nike and Air Jordan, and she is a disruptor. And her manager basically was telling her, hey, Todd Kramer, he's an amazing gallerist, you can't do this and still be taken seriously. And she's just said, why not? Why not? Why not? Every single step of the way, and it's working. And so, when we were looking to launch Punks in Residence, of course, it was this idea of, okay, how can we bring in someone into the community that is worthy of CryptoPunks, and how can they be a brand ambassador to the more traditional art space so that we can continue to be in conversation? And I like to think about a little bit in some ways we disrupt the space, but in some ways we also need to play by their rules, and in some ways we need to play the game and then also game the system. It's a bit of a dialogue, and that's how more punks are going to be in museums. More, the history of punks is going to be known and undeniable. So that's really the impetus of the Punk in Residence program, and it's really about kind of leaning into one of the core pillars of the project, which is we don't know what's going to happen. It is an experiment. Let's innovate and let's see where that goes, because I think we'd be doing a disservice to the project if we deny that it is literally ephemeral with every trade, every new CryptoPunk, new holder. It's a different collection at that time. And so we need to honor that and flow with that in a way that I think is really important.
I think there's also a piece of this which is pushing things into areas that are uncomfortable in order for them to grow a little bit. Back when I had an art gallery, sort of end of 2000s or end of 90s, early 2000s, there was this big struggle at that point with street artists who were starting to come into kind of white cube galleries. Mm-hmm. And there was a strong distinction put out by other people of, are you a real art gallery or are you a street art gallery? Because those are two very different things. And there was a handful of people, and I like to think that we played a little role in this as well, who were trying to break that down, right? And put fine art, unquestionably oil on canvas this month up against, spray paint, street art next month, to show how those were related, right? And people on both sides of that felt uncomfortable by it at different points. But they got more comfortable as things were put better, and it helped both sides understand each side a little bit better. It grew, and now you have, of course, massive street artists in museums all over the world. It helped push that to happen. And I think that that's a little bit of what's happening here, where this thing, which is very comfortable in one place, is being stuck into this other place that doesn't necessarily get it, isn't entirely comfortable with it, but the act of doing that creates this feedback loop and this thought process where now suddenly this isn't as shocking and different, and it sort of makes a little bit of sense.
And it makes them redefine what the parameters are. You see this in the tradition of fine art, just generally in every movement of fine art, from Impressionism, abstract expressionism. Literally, the paintings were too big to fit in the doors of the galleries here in Paris in Europe. And obviously that changed. There's a Rothko exhibit here in Paris that probably many of us here saw. So again, there's this, both sides need to redefine and challenge their parameters of presentation, of medium, of reception, of conversation, of language. So I think that's really exciting. And that's why Nina's gonna be a great partner, where she's having a retrospective at Jack Shaman's gallery during Freeze, and she's like, I want to make the people that come to this uncomfortable. She was saying that the gallery was like, we don't get it, this is on you. And so we're going to try to think of a way that what we do together, the work that we create together, is presented in a way that someone who maybe even does not like NFTs experience is kind of hijacked and hacked and has a response to the art in a new way, and then gets to understand the greater medium of blockchain and the values that the people in this room hold.
Yeah, I would argue it's an important piece of art, not just to make everybody comfortable with the thing that they would like, right?
Yeah.
But to challenge that a bit, make people a little uncomfortable and, think about things a bit differently.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, another big part of legacy, this is looking outward, but we wanted to look backward, or try to capture a time capsule, this moment in time. And that brings us to the project that we're mostly here to talk about, which is the CryptoPunks book. So we're gonna share some updates and kind of take you behind the scenes. If you may or may not know, but Sean Bonner is one of the editors on the book, and we've been living and breathing the project together, along with Zach Group. for some of you who know that group or don't know that group, they're, you know that neon green coffee table book that you probably own? Well, that's them. They worked on that with Nike and Virgil Abloh. So they're really, really weird, and they're really, really bleeding edge in how they approach their design and the way they approach just storytelling generally. So they've been an amazing partner. But when we decided we wanted to do this project, we were like, okay, well, we got to start with the community first. So what you're seeing here is all of the community members who have contributed. Like they have either contributed, and I'll tell a little, they've contributed to the glossary, language, dictionary, etc. So we're really excited about this. And then we're really excited about this piece that Sean's been mostly leading, and it's called Group Chats. So little sneak peek here. Do you want to talk about this process and kind of?
Yeah, I think you guys originally approached me just as a regular contributor like anybody else. Like, hey, do you have any moments or anything that you think is interesting that should be, highlighted in this? And kind of put out this open call to the community to say, how would we tell the story of CryptoPunks using only how the story played out by CryptoPunks themselves. So not someone looking back on it necessarily, but just, screen captures of this history, piece that together. And as we kind of started going through that and looking at what was coming in, it evolved a little bit, I think, because just the pieces themselves don't tell the whole story. There has to be a narrative that sort of helps you get from one to the next, but it also provides this quite interesting story arc of over the years of how people came together around this thing and what kept them there. People came, people left, and where it's at over this time, and the community really being the strong driving force of all of this.
I mean, I also want to shout out Sean a little bit because, it's thousands and thousands of screenshots, I feel like, that you went through one by one, and we archived them into individual events that happened. And then Sean is like trying to curate all of this and tell a story in a sensible way. But it should be, the history of CryptoPunks at that time should come from the community. So we're really excited about it. And so kudos to Sean. And he's definitely been more in the weeds than me. But another piece of it that's interesting is, like he said, we realized it needed a bit of context. There's so many inside jokes, so many things that the outsider might not understand. So if you're familiar with this book, Nabokov's Pale Fire, the story is actually in the footnotes. And so we're kind of taking that approach with this, and you'll see these footnotes along the way that are kind of explaining what's happening on each of these pages. So, yeah.
It's a thread that ties it together, right? Because we really wanted to, we had these conversations of, is this something we want people to pick up and read for a second and walk away from, or is it something we want people to sit down and flip through and have this whole story? And it is more about, all of these things are stories. The story is the most important piece of it. And so we really wanted to find a way to tell that. And I think that how this is coming together, again, these are quick samples, but I think it's going to be a very entertaining read, and I think it helps convey what's gone on quite well.
And thoroughly researched, for sure. I am curious, was there anything that surprised you as you reviewed thousands of screenshots?
I didn't go into it blind, right? So I knew most of the things. I don't think that surprising is the right word. I think that fascinating and exciting is better, because it really was the people's love of this thing which kept them going, right? It was people who, there's some people who are a constant throughout. And then there's a whole lot of people who come for a little while and leave for a little while, and other people come back in. But throughout all of that, the CryptoPunks themselves remain the center focus for all of it. So the people who've been there, the people who are new, it's just this art that people love and want to be a part of and feel associated with. And I think that that's just beautiful to see. And I think how this plays out, and I think some of the storylines that develop in this over the years are just fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree. In addition to group chat, Just going to give you guys a little behind-the-scene peek here. We were just with Zach Group in London and looking and approving over like some layouts, but there's actually a lot to the book. It's 700 pages. It's a tome, not a book. And what we're excited about is we have all 10,000 punks, their metadata, their colors, their traits represented. That's one piece of it. We have another section called aesthetics, which is going to look at like the history of the pixel and telling that story in the traditional of not only like computer art and net art, but also long before that, like what is the history of the pixel?
Well, I think this is a good point actually too, because we showed that list of contributors.
Yes.
That's only a piece.
Only a piece.
There's so many more people who wrote things for this and are adding to this larger story. We haven't released all of that yet, but the context that's provided on the much larger picture is a really big piece of it, right? Those names, that's not the book. That's one small section. Yeah,
I mean, again, we had to start with the community, and then we kind of committed to building in public. So you're along the journey with us. You know, the traditional book, the book world is very traditional. The publishing world is very traditional. So they're like, wait, what are you doing? How are you doing this? But it was very important to us to get outside perspectives. So we have curated and sourced an amazing list of contributors in addition to the community. And something that, you know, has been wonderful is CryptoPunks are beloved. You know, if you know, you know, and traditional art world thought leaders, writers, curators signed on to this project and they wanted to be a part of it, and they recognize how important CryptoPunks are in the history of art, and it's been an amazing response to see their excitement, and that's been really rewarding to understand and hear those perspectives. And sometimes this is not going to be a book that's just a fluff piece, you know? There might be things in there that are challenging for CryptoPunks to read, but that's what it's supposed to be. You know, it wouldn't be CryptoPunks if there wasn't a little tension, I think, right? I mean, let me think about some of the other sections. We have the metadata section, and that's looking, we've gotten some amazing writers to look at the metadata. We have a market section, which I'm really excited about, where we're kind of have these field reports in them that are tracking the trends that have happened, and they're kind of trend reports and kind of a time capsule of this moment in time and what we're seeing. Because that was one struggle with the book is, I mean, even with you in group chat, like, okay, we're just closing down now. You know, there's a point where it's just, you know, that's it.
You have to pick an end date.
You have to pick an end date, yeah. Well, we are getting a little signal that our time is done, but we want to leave you with one really big announcement. If I could have my screen back. Oh, yes? Can you see it? No. Oh, back. Is it here? Okay, so.
There you go.
Anticlimactic. No, but we have Fight On is publishing the CryptoPunks book. We just inked the deal this week. It's a huge deal. They're one of the biggest art publishers in the world. We're super excited about it. We'll be launching pre-orders in April, May, or something like that. But this will be on the bookshelves globally, all over the world. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah, this is about as exciting as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
Producing a book like this.
Yeah, CryptoPunks get their own book.
All right.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Congratulations, my goodness. Talk about institutional adoption of the Web3 space. Big congratulations. Another round of applause for Stone and Sean Bonner. Amazing.